Hello and welcome. Thank you all for joining us tonight for another Gnomon live stream event. As we go behind the render and learn about creating a story-driven environment in Unreal 5. My name is Anton Naparella, and I'm the education lead for games here at Gnomon. I'll be hosting our stream this evening, as always, and we'd like to thank our sponsors, Dell and NVIDIA. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to bring you all of the amazing content here on our streams that you're about to see. A quick housekeeping note before we get started. If you need closed captioning, please head on over to either the Gnomon Facebook or YouTube channels. Now, let me introduce our special guest. We are honored to welcome Martin Teichmann as our event presenter. Martin is a lead environment artist at the Walt Disney Company. He'll be doing a deep dive into a personal Unreal project, a photorealistic antique shop scene. Martin's presentation will explore how narrative and player interaction can shape artistic choices, from layout and lighting to asset creation and optimization. We got a sneak peek earlier this week, and we're excited to show this all to everybody and get Martin on his way with his presentation. We'll be hosting the Q&A session with Martin at the end of the presentation, so feel free to submit your questions to chat as we go. And we'll either hop in with questions as they're pertinent, or we'll save them till the end and let Martin answer them at the very end of the presentation. So now I'm going to hand it over to you, Martin.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to share my work here. So it's always an honor to be able to kind of be at Gnomon and share my artwork here. So yeah, let's dive right into this scene. So it's a long time in the making. So I started this scene like quite a while ago, and it went through several kind of phases and a lot of iteration. And one kind of runs through the process and some like more deeper detailed kind of ways how I create materials and so on to be able to manage a quite complex scene like that in Unreal 5. So first part, I want to actually focus a little bit on like my inspiration and the thought process behind it to that basically like kind of led to creating a background story. What kind of game would that be if I would make a game out of the scene, or if this would be part of a game? What game would that be, and how would that kind of affect the artistic choices that I would make for this? And in the second half, I'm going a little bit more into the actual creation process, like talk a little bit about photogrammetry, how I'm using marketplace assets, and I'm going to share materials and lighting tips. So big parts will be a live presentation directly in Unreal. So please bear with me if anything goes wrong, or if there's like maybe a little hiccup. So that's the beauty of being live, but should be all good. And let's just go ahead and dive right into a quick introduction. I'm from Germany, so actually from Jena, a small town. You can see the distance from Berlin there. And from there, like started working on different studios. So it's like the collection of the games that I had the honor, the chance to contribute to. So I worked, first part of my career was in Germany, working on Crisis. Then I moved to England, working on Batman Arkham Knight. And then I believe it's already 10 years when I moved to Los Angeles, to the States, and working on awesome titles like Uncharted, Last of Us, and Diablo. Okay, so yeah, let's kind of take a look into the inspiration. So as I mentioned, I moved here to the US 10 years ago to Los Angeles, and for taking the new job at Blizzard, I actually moved from Santa Monica down to Orange County to a city called Santa Ana, which is really close to the city of Orange, and quite popular down there is the Orange Circle. That's like a lot of bars and restaurants, coffee shops, and as well as a surprisingly large number of antique shops, antique malls that are down there. So this is like one of the shops that I have on my screen right now. And it's really always fun to kind of explore that and walk around. And it's actually quite huge, like different floors, different levels, like really, really big. And a lot of kind of random stuff that you can find in these. Always like really interesting to explore them. So, and I went there once and I had like this thought, like, hey, this might be a perfect artwork or a perfect environment to create, because you can use a lot of very different assets to create or to fill up the space with interesting props. There's a lot of potential for storytelling there based on what kind of items are in there. And it was also the time where Unreal or Epic released the Quixel Megaskin library for free. So I thought, like, hey, this might be a perfect chance to look into something more photorealistic. At the time I was working on, I believe, like a more stylized environment. So I always like, when professionally I'm working on a stylized project, I tend to work on more realistic personal projects, and vice versa. When I work on realistic stuff, I try to explore a little bit stylized environments. So it was like basically like the base idea of this environment coming from my local shops down here. So, and I basically did what probably would be pretty standard to kind of look into references, collect a bunch that I actually quite like what kind of props should it be, how should the building look like, and basically like start collecting interesting pictures from there. And that was like a really good moment to also kind of stop a little bit and kind of think a little bit about what kind of backstory should this have? Like, what kind of, if I would make a small game out of this, right? What kind of game would that be? Who's the owner of this antique shop? What's their story, right? What's the purpose? Why would you, as the player, come to this environment? Like, what is the reason? What is the mission for this, right? So, actually, let's stay on this slide for a little bit longer. So in this space, like, really good moment to kind of puzzle this together and have a few kind of base ideas of what these kind of backstories may look like, because that heavily influences even really early on how you build the environment and how you create it, like what artistic choices might come out of this background story. So I have a little animation here that goes from the really early block outs over to different phases, and then the final, almost final. I could probably add a few more kind of iterations now that I worked on it even more. Okay, let's go ahead and go and stick to the first picture that I took. Really basic, of course. This is more like to learn about the footprint of this antique shop, because the original, the actual reference shop that I got inspired from, they're actually pretty large. They have a lot of little booths in there with all little theming of little items in different eras. And to recreate the actual size would probably be pretty unrealistic, especially for just one artist to create, even though there's a big Quixel library on my that I can use, basically. So it's like the first block out, and I immediately shrunk it down to something a little bit more manageable. I also kind of put a little backstory in. I personally love to have little, I think I can see my mouse cursor. I personally love to have these kind of stairs to elevate, to have a slight height variation in your flooring. That makes it a little bit more interesting. And also has the chance to change floor materials. And I think what made it really cool is to have this kind of back room that you cannot really completely look inside, and it kind of adds a little bit more interest to the scene. And also, compared to the original, there's like a door now to hint to more to the room or more to the shop than what you can see on the first glance. So that's pretty cool. And you can see like there's this round archway, and it actually is coming straight from this reference that I put here on the left side. And I think it adds, it's pretty cool because it adds the new shape to the environment. Otherwise, really boxy, really square, right? So that's something I wanted to kind of add to it. And I really liked how the light hits the material here and stuff. So I think it was a really influential reference at this point. Alrighty, and I think what we can do is like run a video about just a basic walkthrough of the environment really quick. Okay, awesome. So I actually kind of switched to the live game environment in Unreal right now. So this is running. So it's a little bit choppy. So I'm trying to keep my camera more steady. And now I kind of talk a little bit over some of the thoughts about what this game should have been, or like some of the story background and so on that I envisioned for this environment. So the idea is that you, as the player, you start from the back of the antique shop. You're visiting your grandparents, and these are the owners of this place. They owned it for decades. They're it's their proud kind of possession, right? And you kind of visiting them, but this time you don't. They're not here, right? They're not. The shop is closed, and it's a little bit odd, right? Why would they not be there? So it's like a general mystery that I wanted to establish early on in this kind of in this environment. So you as the player, you start from the back. So the idea is there's like a back alley. I didn't really model that out because I removed actually a bunch of assets from the outside of this shop just for optimization reasons. So the reason you're starting from the back is like two reasons. So one is the little bit of story kind of thing, because it's a bit more mystery. You're not entering from the front, so it's a bit more like maybe a bit dangerous, right? A back alley kind of thing. Also, you're not going through the usual entrance, so that could be a little bit more interesting, a bit cooler, and also kind of opens potential for maybe a little intro tutorial for interaction, like you can find a key hidden in front of the door, or you have your key, you interact with the door to open it. And the second reason is from like a pure environment art standpoint, to create the front entrance with the street and the walkways. It's probably gonna be quite difficult to make it really believable and realistic. And that's a little bit of downside when you're creating a really high detailed photorealistic environment, because everything that's not high detailed and photorealistic instantly kind of sticks out. So if you want to make the entrance really believable with cars driving by, pedestrians walking, that's going to be a lot of extra work. So I kind of cut this out with the little trick to kind of let the potential player to enter from the back. Yeah, so first kind of job for you is to kind of find out, okay, well, I need to kind of look around. Maybe I find them, right? So kind of look a little bit around here. There's a light switch, really prominent, that I on purpose made a little bit brighter than other light switches in the room, just so it sticks out, and also kind of stick it in front of this damaged wall to create like more contrast. So you can actually interact with it, turn the lights on, and the idea is to look for like a way to open. So this gate should be closed. So you have a little puzzle to open the gate. So obviously I haven't really implemented all the gameplay elements because I focus on the artwork here. But when you look around this detailed environment, you at some point may find like keys that are like conveniently hidden here in this box. So you can pick them up, open the gate, and now you can actually enter the main room. And it's made in a way so that when you enter the room, I want the player to go straight to the back of the room. So the gate, only the right side opens up. So the left side is a little bit kind of occluded here by the closed gate. And the back of the wall in here is the brightest spot. So it gives the most contrast, the most interest, the obvious way to go. And there's just a little bit of animation. I'm not sure if you can see it, but the clock is moving a little bit. So it kind of should draw you all the way to the back of the environment here. And as you're going closer, you can see the counter. And really conveniently, there's a flashlight. And this could be a potential gameplay element where you can toggle on and off your lights to explore, examine, and use it as a potential gameplay element. So it's like kind of way to funnel the player into places that you as the designer or artist want to go. And from here, you can explore the rest of the room. So one of the ideas or thoughts that I had to emphasize a little bit more on the gameplay story part is, so there's a box here, and the idea is that maybe there's a box in front of the back entrance that you can pick up as the player. And mysteriously, it's the name is yours as the player, like and not the owners. So it's a little bit like mysterious, like, why would it be my name on that? Who knew that I'm coming, right? So a little bit interested. So you come into the shop, and in order to open it, you need scissors, and you find them here at this counter. So you put it down, and it could be a little cinematic playing where while you're opening the box, the door here in the back is slightly opening up with like an eerie sound. So something mysterious could go on here. Maybe it's a little bit dangerous. You don't know what's going on. So it's basically like a bit the mystery of this environment, right? So the idea was to have a little bit Stranger Things flair to it, something like that. Was like a little bit the background idea. And that's also a reason why the lighting, I try to dim it a little bit to make it a little bit less inviting and colorful and bright. It should be a little bit darker, a bit grayish. It should reflect that this is abandoned right now. Like nobody was here maybe in a few days, 2-3 days, something like that. So that reflects a little bit more ambient light. There is no artificial light source right now. It's shut off to kind of emphasize a little bit on this aspect of the gameplay here. And talking about the gameplay, I also want to talk a little bit about the actual backstory for the owners, like the grandparents. And that was a great opportunity to put a little bit of my own background in. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm originally from Germany, moved here 10 years ago. And I'm married to a Mexican-American woman. And I thought it was really cool to add these two elements into the backstory to make it more personal. So the idea is that the couple who owns this shop, they're also like a Mexican-American German couple that moved here many, many years ago and opened this antique shop. They love to travel. They love to collect mostly pieces from their own home and from their own heritage. So there's areas in the shop where I try to emphasize on like Mexican elements. So there's like a section of like Mexican clay or pottery in here. And I think it's throughout the entire shop where I'm trying to kind of emphasize on that. There's like a section where there is a little bit more German elements, personal elements. So whenever I'm traveling home to visit my parents, I try to kind of capture and use photogrammetry to kind of capture a couple of items that I have a personal connection to. Like, for example, there is this kind of metal coffee box that ever since I can think it was in my parents' house. So I kind of did a 3D scan of this and put it here on the shelf to add a little bit this personal feeling to it. And there's a few of these items, like a little statue, a little figurine, a little stein, and obviously the garden gnome That actually is not from home. This is actually from the house that we bought a couple of years ago. The previous owners left it in the garden. So maybe it was part of why I was drawn to the house, because it had the garden gnomes. So perfect asset to scan and put it into the this environment here, which comes to this statue here. And that was like a statue that's from Frankfurt, and there's a relatively well-known park, the Chinese Garden, and it's like one of the center statues or statues in this environment. So when I was visited a couple of years ago, I just used my phone with reality capture and did a few shots. It might have looked a bit weird when I was kind of taking 200 pictures of a random statue in the middle of a park to all the other visitors. But I think it turned out pretty nice, and it's a nice kind of addition to this environment to add like some parts of my personal history to it. Okay, so I apologize for it's a little bit slow, and I'm trying to keep my camera static here as much as I can. Yeah, so going into the back room here, this is actually the workshop, and idea is that the grandfather, he is the handyman. He loves to repair and restore the items that they find. So this is like his room where all of the repairs are happening. He's also quite tech savvy, so he likes to kind of build and work on old computers. Yeah, there's like a little arcade machine here that he's restoring and building. So this is like really the tech and handyman of the couple. But as they're getting older, they're like already like well in their retirement age, but they still love to maintain still love to kind of keep the shop up. They can't just let go of it, right? So what you can see, there's like a couple of things are falling apart. Things are like duct taped together. There's a little bit of damage here. Things that could be repaired. They're trying their best to keep it going, right? But you can already tell a little bit of paint is peeling off. It's a hard job to keep the shop up and running. And yeah, so this is like the backstory. Of course, there could be like more to it. Like what is the actual mission now that you have a little bit this exposure of the main mystery? Where are the player? Where are your grandparents? Gameplay wise, I always envision it to be a little bit like a mix between Gone Home, Dear Esther, like this typical, I would say, walking simulator, but puzzle game. There's a game series out called The Room, which is really nice, like where you look at items, puzzle them together, examine them, and I always can imagine it to be like this kind of first-person adventure game environment where you basically puzzle through this shop, through this environment, getting clues together, and ultimately solving the mystery of what has happened here in this shop. Okay, so let me go ahead back to my slide really quick. Okay, cool. Yeah, so that was like a quick rundown of like the backstory, and of course the backstory and the gameplay ideas that I put in. It was not exactly that when I started working on it. It kind of grew with the environment creation, but it's actually really helpful to maintain an consistency throughout your environment when you have this backstory in place. Of course, you can always change things if you have better or new ideas, but it was a really good kind of vehicle for me to stay within the story, and ultimately it leads to a more believable and consistent environment. And I also feel that subconsciously, if this environment has this backstory, even though sometimes it can be hard to tell a story just with environmental storytelling, like just with putting items and props and lighting, it can be a little bit diffuse sometimes, but subconscious, I think it really helps to make the scene more realistic and believable for players to look at, because you place these items as a more with more purpose in mind. And the first point here on my slide says everything tells a story, and that's absolutely true down to the individual prop. And the pictures I chose here is like 2 barrels, and even though it's just a barrel, but just looking at them is kind of telling a little story. While this oil barrel is old and rusty, it probably seen better days. It's been through some things, right? It probably was staying in a wet environment. At the bottom rusted away slowly, while the wooden barrel looks like it's brand new. It's just made. It's probably for storage of a liquid, maybe, and maybe not, because the cap is cut open. So I don't know what exactly is used here, but it's still a barrel, but very different kind of story. It in a way it kind of tells. Okay, so I think before we actually jump a little bit into photogrammetry, I think there was like some room in case there's a question or so to go over that. Otherwise, I'll dive a bit into the more technical aspect of this talk. All right. Really cool. So, so one thing that I think was quite important is when I'm using Quixel assets, this is an awesome library with a lot of pieces available. There's like one thing is I wanted to add onto that. I just don't want to just use these the Quixel assets. I wanted to add a few of my own. And secondly is if I'm gonna use my own assets, how do I get to the quality that they kind of work right next to the Quixel assets? So I have like 2 screenshots, and it's like a nice mix. So I have my own photogrammetry assets, the horse statue, or the pumpkin with the little mug here, and they're placed right next to some of the Quixel assets from the library, and I think they work pretty well together. And the best way, or the easiest way for me was to go into the photogrammetry aspect. So again, it matches the Quixel log. I think that's great. And as I mentioned earlier, when I was going over the story aspect of the antique shop, it had this great opportunity to add this personality or personal aspects to it. To add more personal elements that actually have a meaning to me, that probably help with the narrative or with the story idea. And also, it's a really good way to get high quality assets in a somewhat manageable time. So if I would go back to this horse statue to the left here, if I would just sculpt it from scratch and texture it from scratch, I think it would take a long time if I would even able to create an asset like that in this fidelity. So photogrammetry really helps with that, to speed up the process and get a really good quality that would work really well together with Quixel. And for me also was a good way to get a little bit into this. I was always fascinated by photogrammetry. I haven't really done much before, so it was a great way to get a little bit out of the comfort zone and learn new things. And one thing I wanted to also add is like the actual physical aspect of it, like where you have an item that physically exists that you can touch. And it's actually quite nice to be a little bit off screen and do some artwork that is not just in front of the computer, where you maybe even have to travel a little bit to get to the items that you want to scan. So that is a really cool aspect as well. And I think that's definitely something that I enjoyed in this process. Okay, so this like scan that I've done last year, Christmas, I believe. And it kind of shows that you don't need super high-end equipment. So this was basically like just shot with my iPhone using Reality Capture app, which is for free. You can just download it. It's quite convenient. It's a bit limited. You can only, I believe, 200 pictures is the new limit now. I haven't used it very recent, but so it has limitations. But this scan worked out pretty well, even though it is edited. I added like some detail textures, detail normals in Unreal to it to get a little bit more like a crispy look out of it, because texture resolution was a little bit limited because of the limitations of the photogrammetry app. But overall, I think it captured it really well. And this is like a shot from the actual cave. So I think it captured it pretty well, and it was just using my phone basically, and then some editing, right? And that's a really big asset to capture. So I think this definitely is a really cool way to use photogrammetry here. So there's a couple of learnings that I had while I was doing my photogrammetry experimentation. So early on, I basically just I had no kind of studio setup or anything like that. So I was just, again, using my phone reality capture app and put it like in a shaded area behind my house, and went and did some pictures. So you can see on the left side, you get a lot of blue bounce light to it, which can be quite distracting. And sometimes you get a lot of green bounce light from the grass or whatever, right? So in that case, I got a little soft box where it was just a neutral white background, and that kind of really helped to get a little bit more neutral lighting onto the asset itself, so to get a little bit better result for the textures. But even then, it's not really always that necessary, because on the left side is a rusted metal bird statue that I scanned, and I had similar issues with this, where there was like too much blue light leaking on it. The base color was just not really that useful. So I retextured it using Substance Painter and the Smart Material, and I think the result is actually quite nice. I actually prefer this one because it adds a little bit of color, and I think that's a great win for this asset. So I basically just took the high poly that came out of the Capture app, and basically just used this for my foundation to texture it in Substance. But of course, like when you're working on photogrammetry assets, it's still quite some work involved. Like the left side, you see the raw scan, which is quite detailed. So I need to do like some retopo on the assets. In ZBrush, you can use the set remesher, which is pretty good. Gives you a really good head start on that. And that's what I believe I did here on this. But you still need to texture it and rebake the textures. So it always comes with some sort of busy work in order to make this a game-ready asset. So yeah, that's like just a little bit of asset library of the scans that I was doing over the time. So this was nothing that I was basically building and then went into my antique shop. This kind of grew over the time, and I also think that the results gotten better over time. That I learned more about these kind of things.
Hey, Martin, these turned out really great. We had a couple questions from the chat about your photogrammetry. One was just about the app, and obviously that was a reality capture, reality scan. In the iPhone, were all of the assets done through the phone app, or did you use the standalone?
No, so basically reality capture is, I think, the mobile app from Reality Scan, which now is free using the Epic app. I think you can download it directly from the Epic launcher. So some of these props, like the little, you can see on my mouse cursor, right? A little figurine here. There's a couple of assets that I actually used my phone for.
Mm-hmm.
I think like the kind of planting pots as well. But as I kind of gotten a little bit more deeper into the photogrammetry aspect, I actually started buying a ring flashlight
Wow.
because the problem is that what you're having when you're doing photogrammetry is when you have like objects that are a little bit shiny or reflective
Sure.
surface,
Mhm.
then you get these highlights when you take a picture. And when you get 100 pictures with 100 highlights on different spots, the app or the software gets a little bit confused and
Mm.
it adds noise to your result. So what you want to do is you want to remove these specular or these highlights from the surfaces. And the best way to do that is using cross polarization is the aspect. It's basically like this way where you say like, hey, I have a flashlight that has a pole filter on it.
Sure.
And it means it only lets lights through in a certain wave direction.
Right.
And then on the camera lens, you have a pole filter 90-degree rotated. So it basically only lets light waves back into the camera with a completely 90-degree rotated light wave, which means that the light that comes from your flash is not visible anymore for your camera because the
Sure.
filters are killing it out. And when the main light source is your flashlight from your camera perspective, you basically remove these highlights and get cleaner and better results. So, and actually, I didn't for some of the scans. I didn't went with an expensive flash. I bought like I think like a $20 LED light, and then you can buy these kind of pole filters, like a little sheet for like I don't know $10, and cut it, glue it with like some duct tape on top of the flashlight or the LED light, and just need a camera with a pole filter, and it kind of works pretty well. So what I'm basically trying to say is you don't need to have like an expensive studio and expensive equipment. Of course, it helps. It makes it better, quite a
Sure.
bit better. But I think for the first steps that you want to do, like you can just take your phone, take it out when it's like an overcast day, because shadows are not great because you don't want to have an asset with all the shadows visible. But if it's like an overcast day, you can actually go and be really flexible, taking pictures and assets as you go. And I basically not really carrying my camera equipment. Like when I travel home, for example, I don't want to travel with my camera stuff. So I just use my phone if I find it. Like the cave was like I forgot about this cave when we did a little hike in my neighborhood. And it was like, that would be really cool to scan. Too bad I don't have my camera with me, but the phone is probably good enough to get at least some result. And then you can use it as a foundation and add on to it.
Right. To that, there was another question in the chat. Maybe you can speak a little bit more. You mentioned that you had to enhance some of what you created from that larger asset. Can you talk a little bit about, or are you going to go into that later as far as like?
I don't have the scene loaded right now, but maybe just bring up the picture really quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the problem that you're having when you do large objects like this cliff, it's actually quite large. I think it's like at least 6 meters high, probably. This entire wall here, you can tell by the fence. It's a really large kind of wall here. So there's a limitation when you scan an object, how dense the texture can be, even though you're using like an 8K texture. I'm not sure if the reality capture app allows this resolution, just making this up. But even if you would use a really high-res texture, it probably wouldn't be enough for really crisp, detailed environment piece when it's that large, right? So what you want to do is you use the big shapes of it, like the big kind of, for example, here's a nice brighter spot of the cliff, and the coloration is really natural. It looks pretty interesting with where it's a bit greenish, where it's eroded and stuff. So you want to use that and then overlay it with maybe a tiling rock material. That matches the type of rock and the directionality of the rock. So you see, like it has like these kind of horizontal lines. So you want to choose a rock texture that also has horizontal lines if you want to enhance that. And where was my? Here we go. And then add these details back that otherwise are just too blurry for for this large asset. It's basically like a really similar way as if you would create like a large rock in ZBrush. You would probably bake down like a macro or like a splat mask where you have like a global curvature mask, a global global color mask or hue mask or something like that, and then you would add tiling rock material onto it to get the crispy details in. And that's probably a really, really similar approach. The only thing that I'm a little bit not super happy with is because I think I used the nanite tessellation on this. So it was like just came out. I was like experimenting with it, but it kind of softens, it blows it out a little bit. It makes it a little bit like bubbly, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's not as crisp as the original is, but even when you scan it, yeah, there's a limitation of how many triangles you can do. So it kind of blurs it a little bit, and that's what's happening here. So it's not per se bad. I think it looks still pretty convincing. It's just not exactly the same result.
For a phone capture, it looks great.
Yeah, I think it turned out really good. So I'm really happy. Just don't go up there. There's no rock anymore.
All right, thanks. I guess there are any more questions about the photogrammetry, so I'll let you move on. Thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Let's go. Yeah, I have a couple of more like close-up shots. I think. Yeah. So you can really tell that it's like great detail, especially like I think this was also like the little dish here, or the little plate was also like used my phone with that. And yeah, again, it was not the highest quality, but I think for a prop like that, it's perfectly fine. I had to actually reduce the resolution in order to kind of make this work in Engine a little bit better. Yeah, so let's come to the next section, and that's the marketplace assets. So of course, it's really hard to fill up an environment scene with so many assets without kind of creating this kind of super repetitive kind of environment. But even though it's a shop, so they sell the same thing multiple times, so you take this to your advantage. Maybe I can just jump really quick into the engine again. For example, I have a section of records here, and I didn't make 100 different records. I made, I think, 8 different covers and back covers, and I just copied it all over and just tried to place it in a way that you don't really see it that well. And actually have a little personal touch where I added my wife to one of the record covers. So she's a pop star in my world. It's kind of cool. But yeah, when you go in here, you can see like I'm using the same bottle like 20 times. And I think it's fine because it is a shop, so they would probably clump things together anyways and use the same or similar assets. So that's definitely to advantage when you're working on a shop environment. If this would be like an apartment scene, it might be a little bit harder to sell, right? You might have needed a little bit more unique assets in that case. Let me go back to my presentation really quick. But yeah, there was still a lot of room to fill because even one shelf is just one shelf, but it had like, I don't know, 4 or 5 different kind of shelf plates or levels, or how you call that. And basically, it was really helpful to use some assets. So there's like great free content available on Fab, which is the marketplace from Epic now. And every now and then there's like free or limited time free asset packs. And usually I'm checking on them, I think once a month or when they come out. And when there's something interesting or something where I feel like I might be able to use it, I just add it to my library. I just go and add it to my basket, purchase, get it basically, add it to my library. And then maybe in the future, it may come in handy, even though I might not use it one-to-one. But yeah, that's definitely a good way to also add more assets to your scene. And I would also say don't be afraid of using asset packs for your personal projects, because I feel like if you're building everything from scratch, like especially if it's like a really complex scene like that, it's going to be a lot of time that you're using to build or create really simple, really basic assets or pieces. So to kind of use some library stuff for these elements, for these, I would say in air quotes, fillers, might be actually a good way to do that. And yeah, so I also used Sketchfab. So Sketchfab, at least at the time, when you use like reality capture, it uploads your scan to Sketchfab. I think it still does that. And Sketchfab is also like a large library of assets. I think it's now all kind of combined with Fab. But the cool thing with Sketchfab is, let me actually open this. So there's like museums out there, and they're using Sketchfab as like a source to digitalize their items, and they're really high quality. I can maybe load one up, like maybe this gun here. Takes surprisingly long to load. So they're really high quality scans, and they're really useful. So I think it's a great source as well. And the cool thing is they're also on a public domain license. So of course, like double check with a legal department or with a lawyer if you want to use it for commercial product. But for personal project, I think that's a great kind of source to find really good high quality scans. And they're just downloadable, and you can just go ahead and download them. I'm not logged in here, but the only thing that you have to kind of keep in mind with these is that they're usually not made for to use in a game. So when you look at the wireframe here, even though they really put effort, you can tell there's a lot of effort put into this asset to make it look really good. So there's some retopology going on here, but it is really high res. So you probably need to kind of retopo it and bake it down and make it game ready. But it's for sure like a really cool source to look for interesting kind of items here. So this is basically like where my cash register is coming from the from this kind of museum from Krakow in Poland. There's like more museums that are available with really high quality, really cool exponents that you could potentially use, even if it's just for inspiration. I think it's really cool to do that. Okay, yeah, but it comes with a few drawbacks, of course. So when you use especially when you use asset packs from different studios or different authors, then expect them to come in different formats, different texture types, different philosophies, different master materials, different material setups in general. They probably all introduce a bunch of new textures to your scene and makes it more expensive. While you personally, when you create a new asset, you could probably draw from like reuse some textures that you already made or that you already have loaded in your memory. They cannot do that when they sell you the asset pack. So everything needs to be coming with this asset. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And of course, the style is not always matching as well. So they do come with some sort of slight drawback where you have to kind of make sure that everything is somewhat optimized, both like performance and for the look that you want to go for. So I want to kind of dive a little bit into Unreal now and go a little bit over some of the material setups. So I hope the screen is properly visible. Looks good. Okay, so I apologize, I'm just flying around a little bit. So there's a couple of like material things that I'm trying to do in order to simplify, or to basically like, the goal is to simplify the amount of your custom textures that I'm gonna need, or not textures, sorry, materials, because there's so many assets in here. I kind of want to make sure that I have just very limited amount of master materials that I can optimize and adjust in just a few spots, and also have material functionality that adds variation and detail to the props or to the assets without having to make a new custom texture variation. So I want to basically like have Unreal help me make this scene a little bit more interesting before I have to make custom new assets. So one of the things that I'm doing is like a world space-based hue shift. So when I move my little bird around, you can see how it kind of changes color, which is quite handy to get quick variation. So even though this is the exact same asset here with the exact same material, it kind of gives a little bit more extra variation to the scene here. Let me see, I'm flying back in here. Here we go. Just finding these guys. I also made like a material for like this kind of tin containers. I think it's like some classic tin boxes or cans, where I added like a rust effect that is a world space based effect. So I'm basically like blending two materials together. So there's one material for the label, and then there's one material for the rust, and the mask that you can see here is world space. So when I move these assets around, different aspects of this world space mask are gonna be visible, and they give you a little bit of different kind of amount of damage. Just need to use it a little bit careful because it is a little bit expensive because I'm blending different materials. I'm introducing more textures to the scene, so it's it all comes with some sort of a trade-off kind of thing. Yeah, for the walls in general, or for like some of these textures here, for the bigger furniture pieces, I'm also using some material instance where I can easily go in and go ahead and change colors or brightness values to add a little bit more variation. So it's the same shelf asset here, just adding a slight different color hue, so it adds a little bit more variation to the environment here. Okay, so I wanted to kind of dive in a little bit about the material for the entrance. For that, I'm actually flying outside in my unfinished alleyway. So you see behind the curtain here a little bit. This is a relatively large asset here. Originally, I had a unique trim sheet made for that. But then I actually wasn't really that happy with it. So I actually used like a Quixel wood or plank material that I then went ahead and just textured it in a way that I get best results. So when I open the actual texture here, double click on that. So you see this is like the tiling plank material. It's also the same texture that I'm using for the shelves and for the counter, just to limit the pure texture amount that I need for the scene. And it has like these interesting kind of grooves here. And I basically like went ahead and textured it in a way that some of these grooves are textured that they emphasize on the shapes of the door frame here. And in order to get still a nice, unique look onto it, I basically like went and created a macro texture, so I can load this up really quick. So, and each channel has a different kind of mask in it. So it has a unique ambient occlusion in a second UV channel, which is just uniquely laid out, while the first UV channel is all overlapping and mapped to the wooden planks. And with this ambient occlusion channel, I can drive a couple of like different effects in the material. So let me see if I'll find the correct section. So I try to kind of clean it up as good as I can. But now I don't find, here we go, I think. Is it this guy here? I hope it's doing the changes that, oh no, it's not the ambient occlusion. Let me see, masks here. Oh, yeah, here we go, the contrast, I think. Yeah, you can have like a global contrast change on the thing. And it's based on the mask that is unique. So some parts are coming in better, and that's really helpful in order to still get like a unique look to it, even though it's mainly a tiling texture for this asset. Okay, so another thing that I'm doing is I'm adding a, I may have broken the material right now. Let me see if I can undo what I just did. Nope. The dust is gone. Oh no. Let me see if I can dial it back in using these values here. Oh yeah, here we go. So there's like a different material added to it. That's basically like world normal. So every surface that's facing upwards is basically blended with this kind of dust material, or not really a material, it's more like a dust color and a different roughness value. So because dust should be less reflective as the painted wood material. So if I go into my roughness view, here we go. You can see that actually it's the opposite. Yeah, I messed a little bit with my material yesterday to optimize, and I kind of changed a couple of settings here that I probably could be tweaking on. But you get a different roughness value for your dust, and you can even adjust these values separately. So there should be like a dust roughness. Oh yeah, here we go. I think that's the mistake here. You want to have like a higher roughness value here. And basically with that, I'm slowly building up a material that is basically like adding different layers to the material. So I have my tiling texture, and then I'm adding the dust on top, and then I'm adding a gradient. Let me actually go into the actual material setup here. So let me see, I'm probably find a good shot here perhaps. So you can see there's some dust and damage going on here as well. If I go into the actual color mode, so there's a little gradient, as you can see. There's a little bit dark on the bottom, a little brighter on top. And that's something that I'm doing in the material. There's a gradient version that is like procedural generated. So I'm using the world position and the object position, and then I'm using that in order to create a gradient based on the object. So you have like a black from the bottom to white to the top gradient, and that can be used to overlay that onto your material to give it a little bit more unique look. Because the problem with tiling textures is that you can't have all the nice details that otherwise you could add when this is like a one-off substance texture or substance material. So I'm trying to kind of build that into the material itself. One thing that I kind of started using a couple of months ago are these nice redirectors, because it really helps to keep your graph somewhat organized and clean. So you can always add a new one when you type in named, add the named reroute. And that's basically like just a little variable, and then you can later on, when you need it, you can right click it, and then you have all your named reroutes on top, and you can find it here, and you're gonna name, and now you can use that. So it's basically like a connection, but instead of connection, you basically like teleport your data between these nodes, and that can be really helpful to keep your graph organized. So that's what I basically like did here. So I have like my gradient separated and my base color nicely separated, in order to keep that manageable and easy to use. Yeah, so I have my, I have this gradient that I'm adding on top. I have this dust layer I'm adding on top. And I'm using the macro texture to add like some curvature detail and ambient occlusion detail. that can be like really, really powerful. I just wish I hadn't reorganized the shader recently, and now I don't find the one graph that I want to show off, the one variable that I wanted to show off. But I guess that's the downside of a live demo, so I apologize for that. Should be in the mask, but for some reason it's not showing up here. So I might have by accident put it in the wrong set here. But yeah, anyhow, let's moving on. So for the props, I did a similar approach, or not a similar approach to, I basically did a similar approach with keeping it organized. So I have, at least from the props that I created, for the asset packs, I didn't really went through the trouble and converting all of the assets to my master material, because that's a lot of work. But mainly for the props, I'm using one master material, and this one actually is yeah, quite a bit more simplified, because also keep in mind that the more complex your shader gets, it eats away of a frame rate. So you want to kind of keep this efficient and somewhat manageable. And for props in general, you don't really need too many details or too many kind of effects. So I don't need a gradient for that, because most of these props are actual one-off textures. So with a unique texture set and a unique ambient occlusion. But one thing that I wanted to do is having like these hue shift. And that's basically like the logic behind the hue shift. So what I'm doing here is, and I think that's the technique that I found from a YouTube channel, Prismatic, I think is the YouTube channel. I forgot to add his channel to my presentation, but it's like great material. Probably kind of look this up and send it over to GNOME and Fox to maybe link it to this talk at the end. But the method is actually quite simple, taking like the object pivot position, adding all, like split up the X, Y, and Z into 3 different channels, and then we're adding them all on top. So it doesn't matter in which direction the asset is going to be moved, all of that will be contributing. Then with the frag node, we're cutting everything but the decimal values. And then there's a divide node with a parameter where we can control the amount, and it goes right into the hue shift node. So each time we're moving an asset around, you get a slight different decimal value between 0 and 1. And with this divided value, we get like a value between 0 and 1 that we kind of put into the hue shift value, and using my base color as texture input. And that's basically it already. I did added a little switch parameter so I can turn the feature off, because it's not working for all of the props. Sometimes when you go with too crazy values, and I can try that on the on this kind of lantern piece. So this one actually has the hue shift disabled. So let me enable that with a really strong value. So it should be a value of 4, which should be quite strong. And actually, it's not too bad, but some values you can see you get like odd colors that might not look as great. I think it comes especially for more natural assets like wood. It can get quite quickly into something that you don't want color-wise. So I put an option for disabling it. And also it's great when you don't need the feature, you're bypassing it and you don't have to pay for the instructions that the feature comes with. Now, technically, I could use a really high value for the hue shift in order to delete it or remove the effect, but it would still calculate it. So it's always good to kind of have this turn on and off feature enabled for that. Yeah, so I think this is actually quite basic material. I have the option to use a detail normal map. I have the option to adjust the normal map strength, so I can control how how strong the normal map effect both on the unique and the detailed normal map is, and that comes in really handy for like some detailed normal normals. I think I used this on this gate here, so I'm not sure if the compression is holding up, but you can see there's like a nice kind of crispy detail normal going on that I can actually go ahead and play a little bit around with. Let's not save that. So I actually have a strong kind of scale, but I can really kind of play with the amount here. Obviously not want to go too crazy if that 0 is kind of removing all of the detail, and instantly you can see there's like completely flat, no detail. So that's also great for larger assets that are lacking a little bit the texture resolution. Adding a detail normal is really helping with keep it consistent and crisp throughout your environment. All right, let's see if I'm missing anything. Here we go. Let's just go back to the slide. Yes, I wanted to also kind of talk about custom primitive data really quick. And that's something that I haven't really seen much. Oh, that's the wrong Unreal window. I wanted to use this one. And I also just started using that. And I think it's actually quite a nice feature. And that basically allows you to control material values directly in your static mesh. So you don't have to make a material instance for a variation. So let's look at this clay figurine here. Let me just open up the material. So we can have a bunch of material options here. So we could play around with brightness values and all of that. But if I want to kind of duplicate this, so with Alt and moving, I can duplicate. If I would go and change if I want to just have a variation in the brightness, which is really bespoke, right? Otherwise, I could use a little bit of randomized feature. If I want to have just different brightness, it changes both of them because they share the same material instance. So I needed to make a new material instance just to tweak this value, right? So, and that would increase draw calls. It'd make it harder to manage because now I have one more material to worry about in my scene. So instead, I could use the custom primitive data. So I should have prepared something here. So let me see if I'll find it. Oh, I actually haven't. So let's just do it live then. So I have like my master material sitting right here. I just duplicate that. And I go and just apply that back to the new created figurine here. So I just drag and drop it in. So now, of course, I have to fix the textures because it's a different default texture that are sitting here. So let me just do this really quick. So it should be not too much worry here. So I can probably just jump right into the right folder here. I just do this for my second screen. So, okay. One down, find my base color. And now I need to just do the normal map. Apply the changes, and here we go. I think I need to disable the hue color variation. That's a good example where it breaks a little bit with the randomized hue. So I just tick this default off on this material instance. Okay, so if I want to kind of enable the custom primitive data here, what I'm going to do is back in my material, that's the new material I just created. Let's say I want to change the color tint that I'm using here. So I can just go select this parameter here and enable the use custom primitive data. And now you can see it becomes black because now this value is driven by the scale by the static mesh input. You can also see it has like this index. index 0, 1, 2, and 3 for all the 4 different values it has. So now I can, for example, also do the same thing for the brightness. So do the same thing, enable the custom primitive data here. Only important thing is I need to set a different index. Otherwise, it would know which value to change. So it's index 4 because we're already using 0 to 3. And I can still use a similar thing maybe for the roughness here. Where's my roughness value? Here we go. So I just do the same thing here, custom primitive data for the roughness value. And I think it needs to be index number 5, if I'm correct. Yeah, so just go ahead, apply, and save the material. So I'm just moving it to the second screen. I think we're done with the material for now. And you can see this is kind of busted looking because all the default values, they're going back to black. So I have a black color tint, and I have a black roughness. So it's a broken material right now. But if I go down in the static mesh detail panel here, should go all the way down to the rendering or the render setting. Rendering, here we go. And there's the section custom primitive data. So, and I want to basically make sure that I click on the little plus items here. So make sure that the base color is selected here. For some reason, the color tint was already enabled. Maybe in a previous test run, I let it on. I don't want to remove it. So you want to make sure that you click the plus if this is completely empty. I had a bad crash last time. I removed the custom data. So I'm not touching this right now. But you can basically enable these channels. And now you basically have these values set. Let me go ahead and set this to the reset value. And now it actually takes the value that the material had in its default state before we converted it to a primitive data. So before we converted it, the default value, as you can see, is the standard gray. And because I'm using the blend overlay node, a standard gray, like 50% gray, is neutral. When you add brighter values, it will brighten up your material using the blend overlay, and everything darker will darken it. That's why I like to use the overlay node for tinting, because you can go both directions, darken and brighten up your material or tint it with a brighter value and a darker value, basically. Okay, so, and the cool thing is now I can really play around with different settings here. So I can go ahead and change my color. Give it a red tint, for example. I can make the overall appearance a little bit brighter. 1.2, make it quite a bit more shiny. And now I just duplicate it and give it a very different setting. So I could just go ahead and give it a green tint and make it darker, for example. And that's really cool because I'm using the exact same material. So there's no new material added to the scene, using the same one, but all the changes that I'm doing, all the material adjustments are coming actually from the static mesh. So they're stored inside. So it's a little bit, it's nice and easy to manage if you have this one-off custom options that you want to do, and you kind of save the hustle of having to do a duplicate of your material, and now you have to juggle 10 different material instances and so on. So it's a really cool feature that I kind of recently kind of learned to love using Unreal. I think it's really, really cool to use. Okay, so do you have any questions about anything material related? One thing that I wanted to maybe also kind of really quick dive in. So the scene in general, when I started it, actually started as an Unreal 4 scene. So I heavily used vertex painting on this. So I know with Nanite, vertex painting is not as supported. It's still possible though. The only thing you can't do is having per instance vertex color variation. So for example, this pillar here would have the exact same vertex variation than this instanced pillar. I just rotated it, but if I would kind of copy it around, you would kind of probably see the exact same damage going on here, and you would not be able to have different vertex colors for your different instances throughout the scene. But because I have a unique floor and I only use this wall asset once, and I only use this wall once, and again, this is probably something I would do different now, because this is one asset that is stuck together in Maya, basically. It's not ideal for how nanite or lumen works, so I would probably break it up into different chunks. But I think for this scene it works, and why break a working thing, right? So and it gives you the opportunity to use custom vertex colors for just this one-off mesh. So that's why I'm able to do that in this particular case. And that's something that I'm heavily relying on. So when you look at the floor, for example, there's like areas where it's a little bit more worn down. And let me actually go ahead into the floor here. So this floor material I have not cleaned up, so it will be quite messy. So I apologize for that, but I want to kind of dive in a little bit. Actually, it's not that bad. So I basically like blending two different materials together here and control it with vertex color. So I have the actual wood tiling texture, which is a Quixel texture or Quixel material. And let me see if I find the correct spot. Yeah. And then I have like a damage section where I'm using the exact same base color. And I just use some desaturation and damage color multiply, like where I can control the brightness value. And I'm using this to blend this together using vertex colors. So I'm basically just using the same texture, just changing the saturation and the brightness, and then be able to paint this effect onto the floor to give it a little bit more a unique look. And I try to emphasize on areas where there would be the most traffic. Like when you have customers, they would probably all line up at the cashier. So there's a little spot that's more worn down. The entrance area is probably pretty worn down. Let me actually see if I can go and do a quick kind of vertex. Is it still under mesh paint? I believe so. Nope. They changed a couple of things. So I always have to kind of look if it's, yeah, I can't edit it right now at this point. Oh, I know why I can't edit it. And that's a little bit the problem when you're using nanite. So because the nanite mesh is not supporting vertex color, so a little workaround is to just enable it, disable it here in the mesh. So I just open up the floor, disabled, enables nanite support. Click the little apply changes button here. And now I technically should be able to paint. So I have my vertex color here, and of course I keep forgetting which is the right channel to use. So, so I can basically like paint in. So I'm basically using only one blend. So doesn't matter which vertex color channel I'm using here. So with Shift, you can undo the paint and really just paint it down. You can actually alter it. I hope it's somewhat visible on the screen here. Yeah. So and it's using a mask from the texture itself to drive this blend as well. So you get like a nice grungy look on top of it. So you can just paint on the mesh here really quick, something like that. And then important is that you should probably hit the save button first, because sometimes it gets stuck. Let's just continue. Okay. Oh, I think maybe because I have the game running in background. But important is to click the to mesh button. click override, and then save. It probably has a problem with the package because I'm running the game in the background, so it's not letting me override it. So, but now it should be stored because I saved and overwrote the old vertex color with the new just painted one. And if I go back into the asset browser here and enable nanite support again, let me move this all the way over here and apply changes, you still have the updated vertex color in there. You just need to go with this little extra step over to be still able to do the vertex color painting here. All right. Let's see where we're at. Okay. Yeah, so the next section that I wanted to talk a little bit about is the lighting. But before I dive in, just want to make sure in case there might be any questions for the texturing aspects. If not, I'll just dive right back.
Here I am. Yeah. So we did have a couple of quick questions. There was one question about the storefront. They had questions about the pack map that you're using for the different channels on it. There was like a dust kind of Z up mask, curvature, and AO?
Actually, I think I started with like more ambition.
Uh-huh.
So the dust basically is all coming from an like a vector position. So when I dive back in, so it's not stored in a texture.
It's off the material.
Yeah, so it's actually quite simple to do. So just go in the material. I have to find my dust here. So thankfully, I organized it really well. So basically, like the dust blend mask, I'm using the vertex normal world space node, and I just mask it only the blue channel, which is the channel upwards.
Right.
And that basically, because it's world space, it gives you the world's just the upwards pointing normal, so it creates this kind of mask out of it, and I just multiply together with a variable, so I can control the opacity. I can say like, hey, I want to have this dust effect stronger or less strong, and then I multiply it again with like a dust noise. And for the dust noise, I'm actually doing a thing where I have a packed texture here. And the idea behind it is to have one texture that contains different noises, like in different channels have different noises. And the idea is to just use this for whenever I need a noise in a noise mask or something for a material in Unreal, like in a prop, I want to have like some noise overlay. And this is like straight up a Substance Designer one. I just copied that over with a couple of adjustments.
Sure.
Or I need like some scratches, or I need like a more diffuse kind of noise. The idea is to use what I already have, so I'm not introducing 24 of very similar looking different noises that are adding into the texture memory, but they really don't add to the overall fidelity of the scene. So the idea is to use one of these noises for most cases. And I'm using a channel selector. So you can actually channel mask parameter. And that allows you to, in your material instance, to select what channel you want to use. So I'm using the RGBA, so all 4 channels, including the alpha channel, in case the texture has an alpha channel coming in. And that's what I'm using for the dust as its texture. It's like just a noise with a color, basically. And then I multiply this with this normal world space normal effect. So it just creates this kind of effect where the dust kind of accumulates on top. So it's not driven by anything else. So there's no actual occlusion or something. What I do have though is let me find this. Is this mask, and you can kind of see I only use 2 channels. for that, even though I technically have 4 available. So this is the custom bake. And what I basically did was I took this asset, I created the second UV set, which is a unique one-off, and put it into Substance Painter, and then just baked a couple of masks out that I then store in this texture.
Okay.
So I have this ambient occlusion here on the red channel. And I think I wanted to do something with this one, but then it ended up being really similar to the ambient occlusion. So I'm not really using it. And the black channel is a curvature.
Okay.
Basically, and then using the channel selector to drive different effects. I don't think I'm actually using the curvature in the final. I think it added too much noise or something. So I disabled it at the time. So really what I'm doing is I'm using a unique one-off ambient occlusion to get like a little bit of like some details where assets meet, to just get this kind of unique look back in the scene.
Yeah, there's a lot of nice storytelling stuff with the decals that you're using on there and everything else. As far as storytelling, texturing goes, you know, what do you feel? I mean, you've been speaking a lot about that, but are decals something you use extensively throughout the project also?
I do use some decals. So I have a few here, and I think some of them are also Quixel ones. These guys here. I started doing a material for that. I think decals are really helpful. I think for this particular case, I just never really went too deep with that. One thing to keep in mind, the projection can get a little bit expensive. So you want to keep your decals really close to the surface, like something like that, where you don't have like a decal that's like a massive box, right? That, because all of that kind of adds to your projection expense. I'm gonna slowly dab it back in. Might be good enough like this. So there's a little bit. I added like a little poster, a little sticker here. It's kind of cute. It also reflects my wife and I in the background a little bit here. So I started using that a little bit for sure. I think there's like at the entrance I have like a wet puddle kind of decal. It doesn't really look as convincing as I was hoping for. So you can see there's a little bit like wetness going on here. It requires a little bit more tweaking. But I think in general, yes, it's definitely helpful if you want to break up large surfaces with more one-off and unique detail. I think on the facade, I have like some spray paints here. Just to get a little bit more like detail, to break up this monotony of the tiling stone brickwork here. So that's definitely something that can be used as well, especially when it's like this kind of one-offs kind of aspects. Yeah, one thing that I haven't really done yet, that's something that I kind of was starting diving in a little bit. So you can actually go ahead and apply your material, your decal material, on just a plane. I'm not sure if I can find a plane here in my content. Actually, you can just go ahead and create a plane in the modeling tools. It's pretty cool, like rectangle. Is it not? It's not happening. Sometimes live stuff is not behaving the exact way.
Maybe if you click in the viewport, does it appear?
Yeah. Somehow it's not. Oh, wait a second. Is there maybe? Oh, yeah. There's a little UI element right on top. Of this actual thing. I don't know. Oh, it placed it here conveniently. Very nice.
Oh, nice.
I just zeroed it out here. So you can just use a plane. So you don't have to use a projection decal. That could be a little bit complicated sometimes. Like a number of decal materials. So I can just drag and drop it. Oh, just like drag and drop it right onto the floor here. I do this off screen to apply to the material here. So, and now this should sit on this plane. It's probably like, it's really subtle.
Subtle, yeah.
Yeah. I should use a slight different decal. Well, it's not doing it for whatever reason. Maybe I'm missing a thing that I haven't really applied yet.
Sure.
To this material, but it technically should be possible working. Yeah, not sure why not, but yeah, let's just ignore that.
Yeah, another question from the chat was you mentioned a material resource on YouTube that you reference.
Yeah, there's like a lot of really cool channels, especially when it comes to like more tech art things.
Right.
There's like dedicated channels that are really good in explaining technical aspects of materials and lighting and stuff like that.
Sure.
On top of my head, maybe I can just look it up and put it into the chat on the side.
Sure.
Really quick. Like one channel that I definitely learned a lot from in the last couple of years. Let's see. Prismatic is the name. So I'll just drop in the channel into the chat here. I think the guy's doing a lot of live streams as well. So you can chime in. And can I type into the chat? Well, I just posted in the chat here. It can be maybe distributed.
Yeah. We can grab it and push it over.
Perfect. Yeah. So that's definitely a channel that I highly recommend. And he's also very good in presenting. It's very charismatic. It's like, I love it. So it's really good and very informative. So it's a great way. When it comes to materials, there's a whole other level to it where you can use like debuffer materials that can, it means basically like you can drive the appearance of a decal while using the underlying material's normal map or height map.
Sure.
Really interesting effects. I haven't used that. You have to kind of set up your materials right, and you have a proper decal material setup as well. And I haven't really done all that for that purpose here. So my use of decals is actually a little bit more on the basic side. I do have some dust material decals here to, sometimes I'm placing some extra detail to emphasize, like especially underneath this kind of oven, little ash, little dust, maybe some stretch marks.
Sure. Can
be useful. What can happen sometimes, especially if you have like a shelf or something on top of like let's say a reflective floor, you could sometimes get like a rendering problem where maybe some reflection is peeking out of like a shaded area and it looks wrong. And sometimes decals with a really low roughness value, or a high roughness value in this case, can help to kind of eliminate a reflective surface where you shouldn't see a reflection. So you can use it almost like as a little shadow blocker kind of thing. I'm actually doing a similar thing here where I put a top on the bottom, because otherwise in certain angles you get like some weird reflections. I'm not sure if the camera picks it up, but it was a little bit annoying. So I kind of added a very unreflective item underneath to kind of remove that aspect.
Great. All right, we have a couple other questions about lighting, but it sounds like you're about to dive into that. So maybe after we get through that, if there's anything that you haven't got answered, we can come back and answer.
Sounds good. Yeah. So, for the lighting, I wanted to create a really moody environment, mostly ambient light driven. So I don't have many actual light sources active in the scene other than the sun. But maybe before I dive too deep into exactly that, I'm using like a plug-in for my lighting. It's the Ultra Dynamic Sky, and that's also what drives the weather effect, which is really, really cool. It's really complex. There's a lot of kind of stuff to it, but out of the box, it creates some really cool looks for your material or for your lighting. And it comes with a bunch of like existing material functions and stuff like that. So you can have wet surfaces and stuff like that. So I haven't really, I think for this particular lighting situation, I broke that because before there was like some nice wetness going on the floor. But for optimization reasons, I kind of removed some effects because I stepped away from like exterior views of the scene. So I haven't tweaked that, but there's still a little bit of lighting or like wetness effect going onto the facade. So you see like some leaking happening, and that's coming from this plugin. I think when I go over to the window, let me see a good angle. You can see there's like some water drips running down this window, and I think it's a really cool effect here. So that's all driven by this plugin. I'm not really using it too much. I'm basically like using it mostly for controlling the light, the time of day in that case. So it's really similar to your standard approach in lighting, where you would basically like go in and have your directional sunlight, you have your skylight, your height fog, your clouds, and your atmospherics. So it's all handled in one place, basically. It even has like an post-process volume directly built in. I'm not using this one. I'm using my own custom post-process volume, so have a little bit more control over. But it has a really, really strong functionality in there. I think I haven't really tweaked it correctly, but you can see I can also change the weather effect. It comes with a bunch of presets, which are awesome. I don't think it should change much. So if I go for sunlight, it doesn't really change many things because I disabled the cloud shadows on it. But yeah, I have like a light rain effect. So I have a little bit of sunlight coming in and a little bit of like diffuse ambient lighting. Yeah, so in that space, like driving the main lighting for the scene, it's just the sunlight. So if I would disable the sunlight, the entire scene would get quite dark. So there's not really any fillers. If I go into my debug mode, you can see there's like just this one light here going on, basically. I do have a backlight that is coming through this back window here. And that's because I wanted to really focus on this back area. So I created this or added this rectangle light here. I'm also using ray tracing on the scene. So all the lights are ray traced to get like extra details and nicer, softer shadows. It comes at a cost. I'm not sure if the stream is picking this up, but there is a little bit of visual noise coming from the lights. So there's a little bit like a caveat working with this ray tracing. It kind of adds a little bit to the visual noise on your scene, even though it adds really cool, soft, and realistic lights and bounce lights. So this is like the second light that's really strong coming in. I do have the backlight here that I can toggle on and off in order to kind of get a little bit more light into the back room. And what I'm doing on top of that, so again, a lot of the lighting in here is basically ambient light that comes from the sunlight and comes from the rectangular light from the back behind me right now. Let me actually go ahead and check really quick what's the indirect lighting intensity, because that's the control of how much bounce light or indirect lighting Lumen will pick up from this light source. So from the sunlight, it's just set to a value of 2, which is a little bit more like standard is 1. This one is set to a value of 2, and I believe the rectangular light is not that much different either. Yeah, it had actually an intensity of 1 for the bounce light. So, and that's basically like it for the actual light sources. What I'm doing is in some places, when I go into my game mode, you see these kind of floating white boxes, and these are like ambient light planes that I added in. I have one here as well. So if I would hide that, so this actually comes with a very similar approach than the custom primitive data that I showed earlier for the little statue or the little figurine. So it has these kind of, so the material basically has these primitive data, and each of it's just a regular plane, nothing to it other than simple static mesh. And I control the emissive multiply value here, basically. So I can go into the game mode, and I can disable this value to 0. And you can see how the ambient is kind of darkening the back room quite a lot. Actually, it makes it pitch black. And that's because there's just not enough actual light from the sunlight or the rectangular light that makes it into the back room. I do have this opening here, but again, there's not enough light coming in, so I need like a little ambient light booster here, so I enable this. And in order to make this work, there's like 2 flags that you should set on your geometry or your static mesh plane. So let me find that. Let me see if I find it. I'll scroll down a little bit. Is it under advanced maybe? That's probably, no, probably, no. Oh, I should have found these before. Yeah, there's a lot of options. Sometimes it's hard to find the one that you actually want to kind of play with. Yeah, I'm just looking for light right now in the search bar. That's a really cool way to find it. So 2 flags that you want to set on the static mesh here is, first you want to set that it's an emissive light source. And the second flag is affect indirect lighting while hidden. Otherwise, because I want to hide this plane, I want to don't want to have it visible in game. But if this flag is not set, then the emissive light or the indirect light will kind of disappear. So these are the 2 flags that you want to set. And then you also want to kind of have your custom primitive data values set appropriately. So if I go down to the rendering tab again to find the setting, so I could again kind of tint the color and make it nice and colorful if I wanted to. So it could be kind of cool. Let me actually undo that. Back to a standard white, and could also increase the value of this emissive and make it a little bit brighter if I wanted to. But of course, because it's an ambient light, you want to make sure there's a source for it, and this probably is too bright. So I thought the value I'm using here is a pretty good kind of base value for that. So I think another really important aspect is I'm using some color grading on the scene, and exposure is really important. Like before this talk, I actually had a conversation with a good friend of mine. He's a lighting artist, Eli Roth. He helped me out with the exposure setting quite a bit, and that's an art form in itself. So I don't want to dive too deep into that because I think I'm still somewhat an amateur in the work with exposure, but I can basically maybe just show you how the scene looks without the post process. So I created like a lookup table here that I implemented based on, so I basically just went to Lightroom and created like a cool look, desaturated. So if I disable that and set it to a value of 0, and keep in mind, the scene is tweaked now lighting-wise to a more desaturated approach. And you can see it's actually quite colorful. There's a lot of color that I'm hiding with my lookup table. I think it's a little bit like a little bit over colorful now. Also has its, looks kind of cool, but definitely it's quite a difference, right? So this is definitely one of the aspects. So I set it to 0.9. I can go even darker, but then it gets a little bit too gray for my taste. It's almost like a black and white noir movie in this way. So I like it at the 0.9. We get a little bit of color back in. And yeah, so exposure-wise, I'm using an exposure curve. I can just open that really quick. And the exposure curve is basically like remapping when the exposure wants to be, how is that working? Yeah, you're basically like remapping it. So if the exposure wants to be 10 or like it's 0, it actually remaps it to a value 0.25, right? So it's almost a little S-curve kind of look. So all the darker values getting a little bit elevated here. And the actual exposure values I keep in a wide range between 0 and 10. What I'm doing as well is, I think that's probably what is quite helping a lot, is the height and shadow contrast that I'm setting to a value of 0.5. And I believe the default is 0 on these. Actually, no, the default is 1. So when I keep this as a value of 1, there's a lot of contrast. And there's a lot of black shadows in here. So you can see like some parts are, so there's a little bit of exposure, like the exposure value is set between a value of 0 and 10. So the camera or the exposure tries to bring it back into the proper range, but there's still a lot of really black, very high contrast aspects, and it adds a lot of noise, and it makes it a little bit unrealistic because you wouldn't have these completely pitch black sections here. And what the highlight contrast in the local exposure is doing, it's kind of brightening up. Actually, that's the highlight contrast. Let's ignore that. The shadows, basically, like it brightens up the shadow parts of your scene quite a bit. So that's what I'm doing in here. And I do a similar thing with the highlights, just to make sure that we don't have too much contrast here. So these are basically like the main values. There's also like the shadow threshold, and that basically like tells you at what point it's raising up the value or the shadow value. So I think default is set to 0, so it's a little bit less contrasty. And if I dial this in, it keeps certain shadow values at a normal, as the default value the scene has, basically. And it only goes and darkens the really dark spots. So basically like telling the scene that, okay, everything till this darkness value, ignore. And then I'm using the shadow contrast to brighten it back up. I think a good shot, I mean, I did edit my ambient light, but I think this might be a good place to see. Yeah, so if I toggle in between, right? So the highlights kind of stay similar, right? So when you look at the gloss or the brighter spots, they kind of stay the same. But if I toggle between the min and maximum value of the shadow contrast, you can see how only the shadow is getting affected and brightened up. Of course, a value of 1 is way too much, and you could probably argue that a value of 0.5 is already a little bit extreme. But I think it looks good on the scene, and it kind of works. So I think that's perfectly fine. And that's something I think I want to also kind of emphasize a little bit on, because this is a full scene where you can actually walk around. You have an area with a lot of sunlight coming in, so you need to make the lighting work in a very bright area. And we have our back rooms that are almost pitch black because there's no natural light coming in. So we kind of need to fake a little bit or to kind of adjust a little bit. If you would, for example, use an environment, or if you would just have a vignette shot like this, where you might not even adjust the camera left and right, where you don't even look at the back of the camera, then you can, of course, tweak your exposure and your brightness and lighting values just for the shot. But because this is a more kind of enclosed, finalized environment where with all the different lighting situations, the exposure comes in as a little bit more tricky aspect to make it look good in all the lighting situations. That's why the ambient light is really needed to fake a little bit of ambient here. Technically, what you can also do is just add another window. That's something that I actually thought maybe I add a little window here to have the chance to add a bit natural light into the back rooms. But I ultimately decided against it because I wanted to keep it dark and keep this kind of gameplay aspect going. So I didn't add any lighting here. Yeah, so I think just one other touch I want to kind of talk a little bit about, and that's something that happened to me while I was working on it. I got all these kind of slight light leaks coming in, like little highlights on edges of the scene, and especially in earlier versions of Lumen. So I actually ended up creating these massive light blockers because I decided we are not going to go outside the shop. So I'm able to just use a big box basically to avoid potential light leaks. And I think quite important is to add one on the bottom as well. So there is no potential light leak or anything coming in from maybe there's a bright concrete floor underneath, or the sky which is bright or whatever, right? And then Lumen tries to add the reflection of this bright spot and adds it into your scene. So adding this black foundation, I think it's like really large. It sits underneath all of the antique shop here. So it really kind of removes this kind of light leaking. Maybe like one last thing that happened while I was working on the scene. So I actually added an actual body to the gameplay because I wanted to have the shadow, because I think it's a really cool touch and makes it so much more believable. Instead of being a floating camera, you're actually a physical in the scene. So I'm using the standard Unreal stand-in characters. And on default, I disabled it right now, but on default, it comes with a glowing Unreal logo right on the chest here. And I was testing my scene with the updated exposure settings. I was running around and I got all these blue light blobs that would come in and out, and I had no idea where did they came from. What's going on? What light leak is happening in my scene? And then I realized, looking down, that it's actually the character with this glowing Unreal logo emitting so much light into the scene that every now and then Lumen will pick it up and adds it to the scene. So I went ahead and disabled it, and that fixed the problem ultimately. Okay, so you mentioned that there were some lighting questions. Did I answer that, or is there any more maybe?
Yeah, basically you covered everything. I think there are some questions as to whether it was real time or baked.
Yeah, there's no baked lighting.
Yeah. So those are the questions mainly.
Awesome.
And it was interesting to hear in your initial breakdown of the scene. Your thoughts as far as like telling a story with that lighting, and making sure that we follow through there. Do you have any recommendations for sort of when you're starting to create something, how to start to block out that story?
Yeah, I think when you have like an initial idea, and when I'm talking about the story, it doesn't need to be like this kind of paragraph written. It could also be just like, hey, I want to have something moody. Maybe you get inspired by a game, a movie, a song, right? You want to kind of catch this mood. And I think that's probably pretty good.
Sure.
Or you can also ask yourself, what do you want the player or the viewer of your artwork should feel? Should it be like really happy and very bright and exciting? Or should it be a little bit depressing, a little bit mysterious? Or should it be scary, right? And you can start with these moods and feelings when you block in your lighting. And sometimes, and that's something I like to do, is go with extremes. Like for example, when I adjust my sunlight, right, or when I add in my color grading, I try like extreme values. For example, I have a relatively dark lighting, really dim. I just pump it up to a really bright sunny day, just to see how that actually looks and how this feels. Because sometimes you can get lost a little bit in really micro and small adjustments. You just lower the saturation by 0.5%. Sometimes it's really good to, I double the value of the sunlight. I halve the value of my contrast or my saturation of the scene, and really get a fresh eye and see how that looks. And sometimes maybe it changes your perspective on things, and then you kind of have a new perspective, a new idea for the scene that you're working on. So I definitely would kind of also recommend doing these kind of things to keep a fresh eye and get yourself excited and inspired again.
Yeah, totally. There was a question about the camera. Did you still have the question in the chat? They asked if they could ask about the camera, and I'm sure they can.
Of course, yeah.
Oh, he's asking about how is the camera so wide but not distorted?
I think that's just a regular. I can actually go ahead and open the actual actor. One thing that I'm actually excited about is that you can color code your folders. It's a small thing. I never really used it, but it's so helpful. Let me go ahead and open my character blueprint. So I have to say, I'm not a tech artist. I'm not a blueprint specialist. So everything you see now is don't do what I'm doing. So let's go into the viewport. So I just attached a camera to the head bone of the character here. So it bumps around a little bit, but I think it adds to the realism a little bit. It's not too extreme, like some games are extreme when I do that. So, and it's, I believe it's a relatively default camera. Like, let me see, what's the actual, it's a 35 millimeter standard kind of camera thing. Unfortunately, I had a feature I was really proud because I got it working in Blueprints, where you shoot a ray and it kind of changes the focal plane based on the object you're looking at. So you have like different depths of field. When you look at a close object, the distance would blur and vice versa. But it broke, and I don't know why. I think maybe in an update, the camera value, maybe it's a different name, or you need to do it a different way. So I couldn't get it working again, but it's a subtle thing, but it was kind of cool. But yeah, sorry, it didn't work anymore. But yeah, the camera setting is actually quite default, I would say. I only attached it. Just need to make sure that I'm not inside the head, so I'm getting like weird occlusion things. That's like my flashlight. I attached it to the camera, a little bit offset. It's not exact, because if it would be exact, then all the shadows I cast from my light will be exactly covered by the object itself. So I offset it a little bit to get a tiny little bit of a shadow leak over to the object. So to highlight that a little bit. But that's basically all there is to it. Really basic for the camera here.
Great, thanks. I think that's it for now.
Awesome.
And we're actually almost ready to wrap up here.
Yeah, maybe I think I'm almost done. I mean, I haven't gone to the optimization thing, but I think one thing that I like to, it's like some of the Unreal tips, and you can see how I'm excited I am about the colored folders here. Definitely use that. It's actually really simple. You just right click, and then there's a set color section. Something that I just never really used, and I found, and I think it's pretty cool. So there's a couple of like smaller things that I investigate and use. So the vertex color on Nana, I already kind of showed off. There's also a way that you can actually bake in the Unreal editor directly, and I think that's pretty cool. So if you want to, because it can be a little bit painful if you have to constantly switch between software, and especially when you're kind of fine-tune. So let me just go ahead and show the material ambient occlusion here. Okay, so most of my assets, they actually do have an ambient occlusion channel, but when I went in and imported the Quixel assets, most or some of them don't come, or at the time at least, they did not come with ambient occlusion map. So, and of course, you can always go in and kind of bake one and then add it to to the asset. But if you want to do a quick fix, and you could just do it directly in Unreal. So you can go to the modeling tools. And then here you can find your bake subsection. And you can just go and hit the bake texture. So because these are like one-to-one assets, so should have a unique UV layout, should just work. I can also just go ahead and use the ambient occlusion channel here. And maybe go for 1024. You can even increase the values here on the occlusion rays to just get a better result. And now here you have your bake. You hit the accept button, and in the subfolder, you have your ambient occlusion map selected here or saved, basically. I've already done this as preparation. And so I'm using the Quixel master material here. I just did some minor adjustments. I basically added the option to have color hue shift. So this is actually in a material function here. And I just also added the ambient occlusion. So what I'm doing is I just grab the final material output, and then with get material attribute, you can just split it up. And you can also use the set material attribute. So I set expose the ambient occlusion. So you can just go hit a little plus icon, and then you select the channel you want to use. So just delete this additional one. So I basically set up the ambient occlusion, and now there is a texture slot available, ambient occlusion, that right now is just a pure little white texture, so that it's not causing any trouble. And if I go into the actual material instance, like so, let me just go ahead and enable. Where is my enable it? Here we go. I added under the enable hue shift because I didn't want to add another switch to it, but now I have my ambient occlusion available, and I can just drag and drop my ambient occlusion onto this new channel, and now my material is fixed. Of course, it's maybe not as optimized as it could be if I put it into the packed texture, but as a quick fix, it might be really just exactly what we need. And if I go back into the material ambient occlusion debug or buffer visualization mode here, now you can see I have my ambient occlusion assigned to this mesh, and it really helps with a more unique look. You can already tell there's a couple of assets that probably need a little bit of fixing here with wrong values, but yeah, that would be in the future me need to adjust and fix all of the problems. Okay, oh, wrong thing. Okay, cool. Yeah, so maybe the last thing that I'd like to talk about is the nanite triangle percentage, and something that I think is really cool to be able to use directly in Unreal, and that's the amount of details that nanite is kind of displaying. So if I go into my wireframe mode, you can already see some assets have a high triangle count. For example, this cash register is quite heavy. It needs these details, right? It's a really dense object, but you can always kind of go into the asset itself, open up the asset. So I have it right here. So right now it has actually 104,000 nanite triangles. So you can definitely argue that this probably is a little bit high. But when you have this selected, you have to keep triangle percentage, and that's set to 100%. So you can change it. Let's change it to 50%, and then you hit the apply button. And I kind of want to, before I do that, kind of move the window out of the way so you can see the potential changes here. So I go and hit the apply button, and it kind of recalculates the mesh. You don't really see much of a difference, but now instead of 100,000, it uses only 50,000 nanite triangles. And if I go into my wireframe mode, it's a little bit less dense, so it can maybe even go lower to 25%. And it kind of recalculates it again. into a lower triangle content. Maybe it's still okay, right? So, and this is a really good way to future optimize your scene and removing triangles that might not be needed. And the cool thing about it is that if you decide, well, actually 50% was the way I wanted to go, you can always bring the detail back. So you're not losing it. It's not like you're going back into ZBrush or Maya and crunch it down and then rebake it. And now you have to do the whole process. You can just really easily optimize your scene this way and add or remove detail this way. Okay, I think we are probably at time. Let me see. I have a little optimization slide, but I think we covered a bunch of things already. And yeah, let's just jump right into the conclusion of the talk. I think we did really well with the time. So yeah, so one thing that definitely would say is that story drives the artwork. So every choice that you make artistically kind of should support the narrative or the story of the scene. And it doesn't need to be like super highly complex, right? It even is okay if it's just like a foundation of a story. And the second big aspect is how even a portfolio piece really heavily benefits from gameplay thought with it. So if you're creating a scene and you kind of think already about the gameplay aspects, one thing I haven't really covered or talked about is camera perspective is really important. A game feels, or a game environment feels very different if it's third person or first person. And it really helps to have this decision early on, so you can use one of the Unreal templates. There's a first-person template, there's a third-person or top-down template that already has all the camera controls that you might need, and just have this enabled and run around a few times in your environment using the gameplay camera is actually heavily benefiting your artistic decisions and choices, and it really helps to keep your proportions and your environment consistent. So I think it's really, really good way to kind of deal with that. Yeah, and I think I can open it for any questions you may have.
Yeah, let's go ahead. If there are any final questions anybody might have in the chat, we're open to answering those now. Let's see. Right now, we're not getting anything. One question that I had, seeing your whole presentation, was there anything you had to sacrifice in putting this together and building it? I know it's such a complex scene with all of the props and the process of optimizing it and all of those things. As you built it out, what was that?
Yeah, definitely. I think the idea that I'm walking in from the front entrance, having the nice weather effect, that's something that was just not feasible to do, especially in like this typical US street layouts where you have this kind of long straight streets down the road. That was just not really possible to do. And as well, I think the limitation, I mean, there's so many textures and material instances and assets in there. I think it kind of gets to the limitations already. So I feel like I need to go in and remove some assets that are not used as much, remove some textures, or lower the texture resolution. So the idea was to have really high-res textures for everything, because virtual textures, right? But the reality is you need to be still really careful how much textures you're actually adding to your scene.
Sure.
And that's definitely a sacrifice I was doing. And ultimately, I wished I had a little bit more like this kind of backstory that I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the talk about Mexican, German heritage. I wish I had like more of these assets and a stronger framing.
Right.
Because it kind of grew with time. But of course, when you have this idea, you need to kind of still make these assets and add them. And sometimes I've noticed is like when you have like 5 assets and you put them on a shelf, then you have like 20 more shelves to fill. And,
Yeah.
it's like it kind of really quickly becomes into okay, just fill it with cool but more generic pieces.
Sure. Yeah, and it really holds up. And I think that we as our own critics and in our own projects notice those things. But I think,
yeah, of course, I think at some point when you look at the scene for too much, then you kind of lose a little bit the eye for it.
Sure.
And I think what happened with this environment, I stopped working on it for longer periods of time. And then I came back to it. So I was not looking at the scene for quite a while, and then came back and for this talk to polish it a little bit. So I think it really helped to kind of see things that previously I just haven't seen.
Sure, definitely. All right. Well, there was a question about reality capture, but I think we covered that. It's Reality Scan is the app in the App Store if you're looking for that.
Yeah, it's like the naming is a little bit confusing.
Yeah, in fact, I think when Epic acquired that company, they changed the name of the program or something like that.
Yeah, let me just look up the app name.
And you
so
can
Reality Scan is the app. Yeah.
Right,
I think
yeah.
I referred to Reality Capture, but that's the desktop app. What I did a few times, I think on the Cave, because the problem is with Reality Scan, the app, you have a 1 million triangle limitation. It sounds a lot, but for a scan, it's not that great.
Sure.
So what I was doing is once I had to scan, because what's great about the app is it shows you what parts you have covered. It shows you where you already took pictures. You don't have that when you use your standard DLSR camera. But with the app, you can really visualize where you shot your pictures from. So I used these pictures, just there's a function in the app where you can export them out. And I imported it to Reality Capture on a desktop app and recalculated it. And then the 1 million triangle limitation was gone. Still, the material is still, the base material is still the camera pictures, still the 200 picture limitation, but the general scan was a little bit better.
Right. Great. Cool. All right. Well, I think that may just wrap things up. Thank you so much, Martin, for sharing with us.
Having me.
Yeah. It was really great to see insight into your workflow and how you put all this together. Thank you to everybody in the stream who's joined us tonight. Nomen does host a monthly industry and sometimes multi-monthly industry events on our campus and on our live stream. So be sure to follow us on social media so you can make sure that you can catch all these awesome opportunities to, not only get an insight into seeing all these great people's work, but also having a chance to interact with them and ask them questions is really special. And also if Martin's presentation has inspired you and you're interested in taking an Unreal course, we do offer a wide array of both in-person and online courses at Nomen. And you can go ahead and reach out to us, through the Nomen website or specifically admissions@nomen.edu. We'd love to talk to you about all of your projects and all the things that you all out there are working on, So thanks again, Martin. We're really happy to have you. And
thank you.
Until next time, take care, everybody.
Thanks.